When I was growing up, church was a chore. I was never called up and, talked to like that. It was something we did as a family. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. We were told it was a sin to not go to church. I guess I didn't take it too seriously because I remember my earliest memories of church are making sure I got to sit at the end so that I could have something to lean against to take a nap. And actually, I think my parents would sometimes, wanted to sit next to me because then they'd have me lean on them, and then they didn't have to get up and do all the kneeling and standing and do all those things, because they had me. So I'm not sure how seriously they took it all, but. As I got older, when I went to church, all I remember is daydreaming. That was what I did most of my time. And, kind of just when I saw other people react, I'd react. And, it didn't connect with me. It didn't resonate with me. My perspective wasn't listened to. It didn't matter. My questions weren't listened to. They weren't heeded. So I just went through the motions. Now, with no big stick to scare us, and no streets of gold to lure us in, why do Unitarian Universalists, why do we come to church? Why are we here? Why are you here? And what is this thing called church? I mean, we're a fellowship, right? Let me put it this way. What do we see up here in the pictures? What's up there? Go ahead and say it. Ducks and mallards. Right? Ducks, to be sure. And mallards. A mallard is a kind of duck. A fellowship is a kind of church. It's a kind of church that quacks and swims and has all the general characteristics of other churches. Yes, the details look a little different. We have different colorings. But otherwise, we fit the general description. And today, I'm going to use that word church in its broadest sense. Because before 60 years ago, this would not have been an issue. Unitarians and Universalists consider themselves part of the Christian tradition from which we evolved. And church was not seen as a dirty word. In the past 50 years or so, which includes the coming together of the Unitarians and the Universalists, it could be argued that we evolved into what I would call a post-Christian religion, which means our faith is both includes and transcends the traditional Christian message. We haven't lost it. We haven't given it up, but we have transcended it, but we include it as part of our overall message. And many Unitarian Universalists consider themselves Christians. So as such, as this post-Christian religion, we utilize religious words and symbols of traditional Christianity, but we do so under our own terms, redefining those words and symbols to match a postmodern reality. Now, I may have shared this before and here and other settings, but that word church derives, in the Bible, the word it gets translated as church is actually the Greek word ecclesia, a compound word from ek, which means out of, and klesis, which means calling or called. Ecclesia, church, called out. And originally referred to those people called out to lead in the early democratic states of Greece. They were the ecclesia. And from this original meaning of the word church, we could define our postmodern, post-Christian church as an assembly of people called out. We are called out. We are called from within. Called out of our isolation. Into community, called to serve, called to explore and determine the meaning and purpose of life and living. So for us, church is not a burden. It's not a chore, it's a choice. We have chosen to be here. We choose to participate. And it is in that choosing that we are called out. We are called out. But what are we here to do? What are we called out to do? Who are we called to be? When I was in Texas, I spoke several times at our sister church in Lubbock. And I very much appreciated the words of welcome that they would use at the beginning of the service each Sunday. I don't know if they still do, but back then this is what they said. They said, Unitarian Universalism draws from many sources and faith traditions. Our services are varied and diverse, as is our lay-led community. I hope that some elements of the service comfort you and that you will be open to new experiences. If an element of the service does not appeal to you, rejoice that someone else might be touched by it. I really like that last sentence. If an element of the service does not appeal to you, rejoice that someone else might be touched by it. So, if a word or song, story, an example, something doesn't resonate with you, rejoice that it resonates with somebody else. By our very nature, our Sunday service cannot be universally meaningful, except in the fact that we are here to bear witness and support each other. We are called out, as my colleague, Reverend Ken Collier wrote, we are called out to transform the isolation of our lives and embrace the fullness of being together, of interbeing. On any given Sunday, you may think you are not affected one way or another by what happens here, but your choice to be here, by answering that internal call to be here, you are indeed affected and you have had an effect on others. By choosing to be here, you embrace the fullness of being together, of interbeing. And it is through interbeing that transformation occurs. Transformation of ourselves and our society. And this is true not just here on Sunday morning, it's all aspects of congregational life. Everything we do as a congregation brings with it a transformative potential, including this afternoon's meeting. That is filled with transformative potential. At a time in our society when deep connections with other people is greatly hindered by the fast pace and the emphasis on material wealth, the use of social media instead of face-to-face connections, at a time that is much as defined by the ideas and people you oppose as to those we support and belong, it is all the more critical that we take the time to create space in our lives, to nurture the bonds of human connection and foster the democratic principles that are the foundation of our faith. I read a story recently from another U congregation. They were considering buying a new building. And they went through a long 2.5-year discernment process, considering all options and possibilities. And then it was time for the vote. A vote to determine whether they should sell their existing building and purchase a new building. And they had their vote, and when it was all said and done, there was one no vote and one abstention. It was a long-term member who chose to abstain. And she said, when asked why she abstained, she said that as sad as it made her feel to think of leaving her old building, she really understood that for the future, the church, it was necessary to move, and supported the decision. But she also knew that this vote meant the congregation was taking on a large financial burden. And she wasn't in a position to give much money to this project. So she didn't feel she had the right to vote for it. This woman who had raised her children in the church, who had taught Sunday school, who arranged flowers, who had pledged as generously as her circumstances permitted, who spent untold hours doing the little things that no one ever notices. This woman felt she didn't have the right to vote. Let me be frank. Membership in the free church is not free. At the same time, it does not come with a set price tag. Since our founding as a movement, actually since the founding of those churches that gave rise to both the Unitarian and Universalist churches, where beliefs and practices have changed much over the centuries, one thing has not changed. And that's congregational polity. Then and now, a congregation has a right and responsibility to choose and ordain its clergy, elect its officers, direct them in the course of their duty. Then and now, there's no synods, bishops, or other persons empowered elsewhere with authority over a congregation. That is the definition of the free church. You are it. You are it. The authority for the future of this congregation is in your hands. And that freedom, that authority also means that the responsibility lies in your hands. And we all have different roles to play. And by being a member, you have a responsibility to yourself, to the fellowship. But you also have rights as a member. Right to be heard. The right to participate. And we all give according to our own means. And sometimes all we can afford to give is to be here. Because emotionally and financially, maybe that's all we have. And that's okay. Our choice, our collective choice, our individual choice to participate in the life of this church, and our choice to support our shared values by the giving of our time, our talents, and our treasure, that sets us apart. It doesn't set us above, just apart. It sets us apart as keepers of the web, stewards of the church universal. The church universal, as defined by Kishab Shangar Sen. Unto the church universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which renounces all that separates and divides and always magnifies all that unifies and brings peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all sects, classes, nations, and races one global community. Unto the church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and our hearts. That is the church universal. And this small corner of that church universal, the one that we call our spiritual home, is at a pivotal juncture. And the direction it shall go in the future is entirely in your hands. And that choice began by you showing up. It begins by the choices you will make in the meeting that follows the service, and with the choice to make in financial pledge. Just as there is no bishop or synod to tell us what to believe or how to do things, there is no one above to ensure we have the resources we need to ensure our members and our community is served to its greatest potential. You're it. We are it. With freedom comes responsibility. We are the church universal. We are it. Soak that in. We together are the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought. We seek truth and freedom, justice and love. And we pledge the allegiance of our hands and our hearts to this church and unto its members known and unknown throughout the world. Let that soak in. We forget the big picture of what we do sometimes. We get caught up in the details of managing the building and the finance and feeling the friction of our differences. So we sometimes forget that we're part of something much larger than ourselves. Much larger than this fellowship and much larger than Unitarian Universalism. We are the church universal. We are called from within to serve the web of all life. And we have chosen to be here. And the only limits to our potential as a congregation are those we put on ourselves. Who do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? These are questions that I can't answer for you. These are questions you have to wrestle with yourselves as a community. They're not easy questions. But whatever we decide moving forward, however we move forward, we do it together. And when we do things together, when we do things collectively, when we do things out of a shared commitment to our shared values, a magic happens. A little light is emitted. And the more we foster the light, the more it will shine. And the more we let it shine, the more the world will see we have something to share. And we can't help but make the world just a little bit brighter. So be it. Amen. Blessed be. So let's join in our